All right, 5 things that'll raise your insulin, and that if you're trying to get into ketosis, if you're trying to lower your blood sugars, these are definitely having their effects on you. All right, hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the 5 different things that'll spike your insulin, and ultimately raise your blood sugar. And if you're trying to lower your blood sugars, if you're trying to get into ketosis, and if you're trying to fast, these things are definitely affecting you. Okay. So welcome to today's video. Basically make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit that bell because I'm going to continue to share different information. And my goal is to help type 2 diabetics, insulin resistant, people that are dealing with that weight loss resistance. And the more you subscribe, the more you share, the better it helps, the more people I can help, the more people that I have an impact in. And that is my goal in these videos. So depending on your goals, we're going to talk about the 5 things that can raise your insulin, but depending on your goals, whether that's to lower your blood sugars, whether that's to improve your A1C, whether that's to kind of break through some new weight loss goals, or even get into ketosis. I mean, the keto diet is definitely something that is becoming more and more popular. You have to pay attention to these 5 things, okay? Because, when you consume these, some of them you might be surprised by, because a lot of the different media, a lot of the things that we're told don't always fit in and make sense when you really look at the brass tacks of how these things work. Okay, so here are the main things to pay attention to in terms of insulin production and the release of insulin and its effects on our bodies. Number one, okay, carbs. Now, this would make sense to most people, but we have to remember, what are different carbs? So carbs, when we eat those, directly will make your body produce more insulin. So we need to make sure we're avoiding those carbs. These are the grains, things like rice, processed corn, things like that. Processed food, something that comes in a box that you just unpack and eat right away. Pastas and breads. Those are a big number one impact. Most people know that one. And I think that's a good point too, is stick around to the end, because I'm going to talk about a few things that might not make sense, that might be a surprise. And ultimately too, you really test these, right? If you're trying to be in ketosis, if you're trying to improve your blood sugars, I'm going to talk about some of these things, but make sure you're testing. If you use your meter to look at your blood sugars, because if you eat a food and your blood sugars go up, right, that means you're releasing insulin if you're insulin resistant. But importantly too, if you're trying to be in ketosis, if you eat something that's going to lower your ketones, but if it's a big drastic drop from one day to the next, means you're releasing more insulin. So sorry, little tangent there. But number one, carbs. Make sure to avoid those carbs. Number two, this is maybe a branch of the carbs, but fruits, berries, different types of fruits, and then even cooked vegetables, raw vegetables too. But I'll explain that in a minute. But this is a big one, right? Because when people try to eat better, they're trying to lower blood sugars. They're like, oh, I'm just going to eat fruit, right? And they think they're avoiding all these different sugars, but we have to remember that fruit is sugar, specifically fructose, right? And there's a big component in the liver in controlling our blood sugars, insulin resistance, things like that. And fructose is only processed through the liver. And when you eat a lot of fructose, basically it tells the liver, produce more fat, put more fat into that liver, those types of things. That's one of the big problems. High fructose corn syrup is a problem, but that's another conversation. So be careful with those fruits, right? Especially too, because when you eat different vegetables, they come with fibers that go with them. So, I mean, maybe I'll put a tangent in there to be careful with the juices too. All right, so fruits, berries, and cooked vegetables. Why I say cooked vegetables is the fiber aspect. So when you eat a raw vegetable, there's a lot more fibers there. That's going to slow the absorption of sugar in the gut. That's going to keep insulin lower. When you overcook them and you get them really mushy, basically what that does is it removes that fiber component and it brings out the starches. Okay, so be careful with those. Number 3. Now this is a big one, and it's really anything sweet, right? And I'm going to talk about this one where you don't even have to fully consume it. But when we get something that's sweet on the tongue, that's going to release insulin because your body is getting ready for sugar. As soon as it hits your tongue, your body's like, oh, something sweet's coming down the hatch. I better release some insulin, get that ready. I mean, that's why you can take your blood sugar and then immediately eat something sweet, and all of a sudden that blood sugar goes up. Okay. Your body didn't have enough time to bring that in, digest it, and release those sugars. What it's doing is as soon as it hits your tongue, as soon as it hits your lips, it's getting that insulin or that sweetness, and it's saying something sweet's coming. I better dump some sugars, make some room, and I better release some insulin. So this goes for anything sweet, but I think especially important to avoid those artificial sweeteners. You know, if you see something that ultimately is labeled zero sugar, is 0 calories, but then you eat it or you drink it and it's like, whoa, this is sweet, that means it's using an artificial sweetener. Now, there's some really bad ones like aspartames and the Splendas and those types of things. And they're problematic for other reasons we can talk about. But in terms of insulin, those artificial sweeteners are problematic. You know, stevia even is a better option, still sweet, still going to have that insulin effect. The best one out there is probably monk fruit extract, because it does have that sweetness, but it doesn't necessarily have the same insulin rise as some of the others that do. But just kind of keep in mind that anything sweet is going to affect your insulin levels. And when you're trying to make some of these changes, these can have the effects. Number 4 is too much protein. You know, believe it or not, I'm definitely a proponent where if you're trying to improve your blood sugars, if you're trying to improve, you know, your fasting, those types of things, start switching out the carbs for good fats, good proteins. But with so much information out there today on these low carb sort of diets, it's a common mistake is that they're way too protein heavy. Lean more towards the fats, lean more towards the good fats, but be careful with how much protein you're getting in a day, because eventually what can happen is your body will start turning some of those proteins into sugars, therefore raising your insulin. You know, so take a look at that. Make sure you're leaning more towards those fats. You're not getting too much protein. And then number 5, you know, a big one, and this is a very broad subject, but one of the worst things that you can do for your insulin levels is being chronic stressed. Now there is a difference between the good stress and a bad stress, and I'm definitely leaning more towards the bad stress types of things, because your body does not recognize the difference between a physical, chemical, or emotional stress. And when you're under stress, your body's going to release certain hormones that will increase your insulin, that will increase your blood sugars, and therefore create problems for your goals. You know, so like this can be an emotional stress, whether you're worried about an upcoming deadline, whether your boss is a jerk, or whether you're arguing with your spouse or significant other. But those are the big ones. You know, improper sleep, those types of things are considered bad stressors. So finding an alternative where you're getting a good stress, right? This could be something where good stress is different cold therapies. A good stress is like a meditation. A good stress is even things like fasting or exercise. You know, exercise is a different conversation between how long cardio should be versus burst training or quick intense training, and how those affect your body. But ultimately, look at those different stressors and how you balance those together. But ultimately, so if you're looking at lowering blood sugars, if you're looking at losing those extra pounds, if you're looking to try and start a low carb, you know, diet where you're trying to get into ketosis or something like that, make sure you pay attention to these 5 things. Watch out for your carbs. Watch out for the fruits, berries, those types of things, overcooked vegetables. Be careful of the big one, artificial sweeteners. Even the good ones are going to spike your insulin. Too much protein, and then watch that stress. Make sure if you know, it's not always something we can control, but you're finding ways to improve that stress for you. You know, meditation, like I said, or doing something fun where you're learning a new habit. I recently have decided that I know Spanish, but I'm going to try and learn some French because my wife speaks French, and I'm going to work up on my Spanish. And soon enough, I want to start learning to play the harmonica. Maybe that's a new video. You can laugh at me a little bit there as I learn the harmonica. If I stop making videos all of a sudden, it's because my wife is not happy that I've picked up the harmonica and she has ended me. But anyway, more to come on insulin, more to come on blood sugars, more to come on intermittent fasting. So make sure to check out. I'm going to put those videos up here. You know, subscribe, hit the bell, share these out. My goal is to improve your health. My goal is to make you happy. I'm really good at helping people with diabetes, insulin resistance. So if you know someone, make sure to share this with them, because that is my goal in this. I want to help you to be happy, to be healthy. We'll see you on there.